What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we're going to talk all about minimum effective dose strength training. In particular, how you can work out the correct minimum effective dose of strength training for either yourself or your client, how you set up the experiment, how you test it, and then like I said, end up being able to train less and get the same or if not even better strength results than what you were getting on much higher doses of training. Finding your minimum effective dose of strength or hypertrophy training is one of the linchpins of successful hybrid or strength and conditioning program. And that's why we focus on it so much here at General Physical Preparation. I mean, if you really want to dive down the rabbit hole of successful implementation of minimum effective dose strength training, I highly recommend you check out our course GPP Level 1 down below. Because the reality is, even if you aren't training hybrids or strength and conditioning clients, maybe your clients are just everyday people who want to get a little bit stronger, understanding how to assess, test, and then apply a minimum effective dose of strength training is just such a huge benefit for everyone's clientele who doesn't want to train less and get better results. So normally the major questions I get whenever I discuss finding and applying a more minimum effective dose of strength training are, how do I know what the minimum effective dose is for me? How do I know if it's working? How will I know if I'm detraining? Can I really expect the same or better results by doing less work in the gym? A lot of them can't make sense of that. And as someone who loves and generally promotes a lot of static programming concepts on a week-to-week basis, it always shocks me when people ask me like, yeah, how am I meant to know if I'm progressing? Because we just sort of have those mechanisms built into our programming system here at General Physical Preparation. Okay, so let's start to work through how you actually apply lowering your training volume in an attempt to continue getting stronger. So the first thing that I try to hammer home to anyone who's interested in running a minimum effective dose experiment is, at the end of the day, it is just a leap of faith. So if your heart rate's increasing at the idea of lowering your training volume, I'd say that that's a good sign that you are a great candidate to experiment with a lower training dose, because maybe you've just got a little bit too attached to higher training volumes and it's costing you other opportunities with what you could be doing with your training or just any of that spare time. At the very worst case scenario, you do detrain a little bit, but it's not going to be like you wake up and lose 50% of your muscle and 50% of your strength overnight. What you're going to experience if you completely undershoot your volume is just a very, very slow detraining effect. You'll start losing maybe 3 to 5% off your top end on strength. Maybe you look in the mirror and you feel like you look a little bit flatter, even though it's more likely that that's your body dysmorphia than any appreciable muscle loss. In my experience, coaching a lot of athletes through these sorts of experience, even when you get your dose wrong, how it plays out a lot of the time is, in the short term, even if you do dramatically undershoot their required volume, you still sort of get this increase in top end strength in the short term, because these high volume strength training addicts are just carrying so much fatigue with them that you're almost throwing them into the pseudo peaking phase. So normally when you're experimenting with lower volumes, you increase the intensity a little bit. So yeah, they almost get this peak or buff in the short term on their top end, maybe in the first 4 to 6 weeks. And it's sort of after that initial 4 to 6 week phase where you start to realize and see that there's been a bit of a detraining effect. And that's where you can just add a couple more sets in. Okay, now moving on to the second problem or question that a lot of people have. How do I know if my minimum effective dose of training is working? So something we push a lot of here at General Physical Preparation is a more static approach to programming. And it's not that you have to keep things static year round. Having said that, when we're trying to run experiments with key variables in our programming, we really like to keep as many things in the exact same week to week as possible. So in a lot of strength training programs on a week to week basis, you'll see these progressions in either intensity creeping up. So week 1 might be 75%, week 2 might be at 80%, and so on, or maybe the coach is adding or subtracting sets, so it's not a static amount of volume. That's also something that's fluctuating. And when you have too many of these variables changing in any given week to week, of course it becomes hard to understand the impact that any of these changes are making at any given point. But when you're just hitting copy and paste on your program every single week, it's going to be extremely easy to tell exactly how your athlete is progressing or regressing in real time. Circling back to what I was saying before about even when you undershoot the training dose, you're probably going to get this short-term peaking benefit, but definitely from weeks 4, 5 and onwards of your experiment, you're getting a lot cleaner data, because realistically, if you've undershot the dose, you should have seen, some reasonable detraining by this point in time. And so where I would personally start a lot of people with this experiment is anywhere between 1 to 4 sets a week of a lift they care about. And you just pick your starting point, you keep that the same, you figure out your intensity. Like I said, you probably want to bump up the intensity of the average set if you have been training with higher volumes. Another method that makes it really easy for us to tell tell if our programming's working here at GPP is all our strength training prescriptions are RPE based. So for example, a classic training prescription, maybe for a squat workout here for us, would be we give the athlete a top single at an RPE 6 or 7, and then they might have some back down sets, maybe 2 sets of anywhere between 3 to 5 reps at an RPE 8. And over the course of weeks, we're just gonna monitor the numbers that the athlete puts up at that same intensity for the workout. And when things are going well, you should see the numbers for that top single trending upwards. Same for the back off sets. Maybe in the first couple of weeks, their top set was somewhere around 170 kilos at an RPE 7. If things are going well, 4 to 6 weeks down the track, we would expect to see maybe 175 kilos, maybe 180 kilos if things are going really well at the same RPE. But you can see how, if 1 week your top set prescription was RPE 7, the next week it's RPE 8, the next week it's RPE 8.5, who knows if you're actually making progress or not. It's this more static approach to programming that makes it so clear if you have the right training dose. I know it's a bit of an internet meme, the idea of your coach just hitting Control C, Control V every single week, but honestly, if you have any halfway decent of a program, in my opinion, it's exactly what your coach should be doing 90% of the time, maybe even 99% of the time. If your programming's dialed in, you should be hitting Control C, Control V a lot. Don't be ashamed of it. It's just how we get results. And so why does low volume or a minimum effective dose work so well for so many people? In our opinion, the main reason people might get better results with a lower dose of strength training really just comes down to intentionality, or maybe you weren't as locked in for all your sets as what you thought you were, and you really struggled with the quality aspect of training. In my opinion, the majority of athletes and coaches dramatically overestimate the amount of sets in a single workout, or even over the course of a total week, that their athlete is truly capable of locking in for and just putting up good quality work. And this is where, if you are one of those people who's worried about dropping your training dose, this is where you compensate. You don't get to do 5 to 8 sets of squats this workout, or maybe even this week. I'm gonna give you 2 to 3 sets of squats, and you better concentrate for those squats more than you concentrated on any sets before in your life. Even if you're not some brain-rotted teenager, maybe you're just like a busy person who has a job, that first 30 minutes of training is probably incredibly guilt-free. You're completely focused on the workout. As you start to get in the back end of it, you're thinking about your partner being stuck at home babysitting the kids. You're like, did I remember to do the dishes or take the bins out today? More chance for your boss to send you a stressful text message. Even if you are someone with slightly higher volume needs than your average person, there's still this truth that exists that the less you do, the more quality you're honestly capable of. And that is why here at General Physical Preparation, we are so focused on the quality aspect of training, not just getting people to do more and more volume to drive progress. So if you are interested in better understanding and applying these concepts such as minimum effective dose strength training, playing around with things like auto-regulation for your clients and a static setup to your program so you can run these sorts of experiments and get good data individualized to the athlete, please check out GPP Level 1. The pre-recorded content, especially our unit on programming, is probably the most based and up-to-date modern approach to periodization available. And on top of all the pre-recorded curriculum, you also get access to me in multiple ways through a Discord, where you got 24/7 access to me and a whole bunch of other weapons. And we also have 3 weekly live calls a week where you can ask me questions across a Zoom call. I can help you troubleshoot programs or whatever dramas you're having with your clients, or maybe you need help expanding your business. No one is offering comprehensive support and mentorship like we are in GPP Level 1. So check that out. There's a link for it down below. If you're not interested in that, YouTube will be suggesting 2 of my other videos. So if you go binge some of my content, I'd really appreciate that. And I hope you enjoy training less and making more gains.